Good morning, Quilt Roadies. Well, I thought I would do today's video next to the fireplace, so we had to move some furniture around because all of a sudden in my head this morning I was thinking about the Fireside Chats by our former president Franklin D. Roosevelt, who did fireside chats from 1933 to 1944 as a way to help America during times of stress and anxiety. And I thought, well, this is kind of a good time to do something like this. And since today's video is going to be answering a lot of your questions, I thought, what better place than to do a fireside chat? I was amazed by the response to my request for questions and answers. I absolutely enjoyed reading all of the stories and histories and memories that you shared with me. And I encourage everyone who sees this video to go back and read the comments. There is a lot of wonderful memories and history that was shared because I did ask that whatever question you asked that you also answered, and it was so fun. It was so fun. It makes me even more connected to everyone out there, which is really what we want right now. Now, I'm going to address the elephant in the room, although it was not asked. It gets asked frequently, and so I'm going to answer this question first. Where do you get your t-shirts? Yeah, these are cool. These are cool. A lot of times they'll come across on Facebook, and so then I just order them. If I like one, I just order it from the company that's advertising on my Facebook feed. So that is where this t-shirt came from. Although I don't think you'll be able to find this one now because as soon as I saw it, I bought it. But it is a total copyright infringement. And I haven't seen it again. So, you know, there we go. I've got a one of a kind there. I'm going to start with the questions. And I went through and wrote them down. And I will just go through and start answering them for you. So Ellen and Nancy asked, how did the Roadies start? Interestingly enough, I had retired, and I had retired before G retired. And when I told him that he was cramping my style, yeah, it was like I was sitting at home for, about a year, not able to really hit the retirement road because he was still working Monday through Friday. So finally, it was decided that he would retire. And so what to do upon retirement? That means that you're together 24/7. We always have enjoyed camping. We wanted to explore the United States and start camping. But 24/7 in an RV or a trailer or a van, you really have to, and you're together 24/7, you really have to think about what you might want to do to maintain a healthy relationship when you're together all the time. And so I had said, I want to travel, but I don't want a scrapbook. I had tried that, and it's just a whole lot of product to haul around. And I said, how about because G has photography experience, I said, how about we travel and video where we go, and then when we're too old to travel, we can go back and look at our videos. And then I took it one step further. I said, I don't think there's any, that I know of, any quilters out there who are documenting their quilting travels along with their travels. And thus, Quilt Roadies was born. When did you begin quilting? This was asked by several of you, but Annette was the first one to ask, and I began quilting in 1993. A few friends of mine had already started dabbling in it, and they were talking about it, and then one evening, G and I were waiting for the door to open to a bookshop that was downtown Bend, Oregon, and for a Valentine's poetry reading, and I was bemusing the fact that I had nothing that I was passionate about, no art that I was passionate about. And I said, that I had some friends that were encouraging me to take a quilt class. And G was like all for it. He said, go for it, do it, and I did. So 1993 is when I started. Let's see. Suzanne asked when you, that when she built her home, well, she wondered if when we built this home here, did we have a plan, and was the way my beehive is built, was it part of that plan? Excuse me. And how did you get the stove up the stairs? So, this is the thing. We're kind of a practical couple in a lot of ways. And so we didn't, this is a custom built home, but it is by a subdivision builder. We did not want to pay custom home prices because the one thing about us is every piece of real estate that we have bought, we tend to first of all look at the resale value, and we kind of want to stay below our means and make it a practical buy. But I knew I wanted a sewing room, and so when we went to this builder over in the next town and asked him, we were lucky because the time was the real estate market and building market was down locally during that housing market kind of crisis time. And we asked him if he would even come over to the next town and build a house, and they said yes. And then we had to figure out, could they fit a house on this particular lot, because it's weirdly shaped. And they said yes. And so we just gave them a guideline. We did not, we trust that if you choose someone with experience, they're going to know more than you do. So we just told them we wanted a sewing room, we wanted an oversized garage, we wanted a great room concept, and 3 bedrooms, and that was it. And so when they came back with the design, I don't think there was anything that was that we changed. We pretty much liked the design they had, and so the only thing was I had told them that I would prefer the beehive to, since it's above the garage and on the pitch of the roof, there was a thought that it might not have any walls, that it would be pitched, but they were able to put regular, height walls in there. And I told the builder, I said, I don't need a bathroom up there. I thought that would add extra money, but he said, no, on a resale, that could be another master bedroom with a full bath. And so we did that, and boy, as I have aged, I am glad there's a bathroom upstairs. Yeah, so that's how the beehive came. As for the stove, oh my gosh, now, for those of you that don't know, that stove belonged to my parents. It was their first stove. It's a cast iron stove, cast iron gas stove. And it has been hauled around by my family since my parents first bought it. And so I inherited that stove, and I wanted to incorporate it in the house, but it's too old to be safely plumbed and everything, And so I decided to use it as a focal piece in my sewing room. But to get it up the stairs, holy moly, that was the scariest piece of furniture to move into this house. And one of the gals that is in my quilt group, her son and his friend were our movers. He at that time worked for a furniture company, and the two of them hauled that cast iron stove up there. It truly was the scariest piece. And I told my children that when we go to the great beyond, that they need to just bang it apart to get it back down. They don't need to keep it, because I don't know how it would come down the stairs. Okay, Nancy asked if I was an RN or an LPN. I was an RN, and I worked first in labor and delivery, and then with my second pregnancy, I had pretty significant morning sickness, and so I couldn't tolerate certain odors that were part of labor and delivery, and so then I went into NICU for like, probably I floated in and out of there for about a year, and then I went back to labor and delivery and was there until about the last 10 years of my career. I worked for the OR as a pre-surgery nurse, and that was evaluating and processing and getting patients into the operating room. But as a labor and delivery nurse, I also scrubbed and circulated occasionally. How long do you sit at any one time stitching? Well, I'm not a very good sitter. I get distracted really easily, so I can spend 4 hours in my sewing room, but it's generally not on one project, because I can easily get bored and move around and on to several different things. So I have several stations set up in my beehive. I have all of my applique supplies in one area, my hexie supplies in one area, my stitching, hand stitching, my sewing machine. So I am constantly moving around. But occasionally I will get an opportunity to spend 4 or 5 hours up there, but it is not a consistent 4 or 5 hours. I'm always running around doing something. Cheryl asks, what's next on my wool applique? I have no next. I have so many UFOs and so many things that I love that my next is always part of my past, if that makes sense. So I have at least a couple of Sylvia Pippin's wool and sashiko projects in process. I have Sue Spargo's projects in process, Buttermilk Basin, Primitive Gatherings. So I don't have anything new in terms of that I'm going to drag out another new big project. I'm hoping during this time to make some progress to the ones that I have. Who taught me stitches? Well, I don't think there was any one person. I learned one of the first wool block of the months I did was at So Many Quilts in Bend, and so I learned from that instructor there, who, I'm not sure if it was Marianne or not, because it was so long ago, but it might have been Gail, who is one of the co-owners of that shop, but I did learn a basic buttonhole and whip stitches locally. Sue Spargo's online demos, and I try to take classes whenever Sue's in the vicinity. I also will chase her sometimes around the country, trying to learn new stitches from friends. I mean, it's a very sharing community, and it lends itself to group stitching, so I learn from other stitchers who I'm stitching with. It's not like I have any particular instructor, but yeah, it's the community that I learn from mostly. Deb asked, have I been to New England? I have been to New England. I was actually, I was born overseas, but my father was from New York. So I have been to New York. I've been up the coast to Canada. But I would like to go back again, especially in the fall. Okay. So several people, including Narelle, Mel, and Linda, asked, how long have you been crafting? I would say I've been crafting since I was in my 20s. I get very excited about something new, and then I like to share it. And so it's kind of interesting. I did needlepoint at one point, and then I taught needlepoint. It's kind of funny how that is, but I don't needlepoint anymore. But I learned embroidery somewhere. I think I was embroidering my clothes and blue jeans in college, and my friend Robin taught me to cross stitch when we worked the night shift as nurses, and then my friends in my fabric stalker quilt group, I learned a lot from them because we did a lot of retreats and sharing and workshops. So I've been crafting for probably since my 20s. Deborah asked, have you always lived in Oregon? No. Before Oregon, we lived on the coast in California, and the central coast area. And G's father lived in Bend and then in Sisters. And so we were coming, from the time we were married, we were coming to Sisters for vacation, our vacation time. And actually our honeymoon was camping in Oregon. So we've been camping since we first met. So Oregon really was a place that we vacationed all the time. Sarah asked, what type of books do I read? I read kind of all kinds of books. I'm most attracted to books like Malcolm Gladwell's books, or fact-based books, you know, nonfiction. I'm most attracted to those. But I love a good mystery. And the things that I have not been attracted to, although I love like Star Wars movies, I've not been attracted to the sci-fi genre of books. Although the Harry Potter series, the fantasy series Harry Potter, I loved. Not so much the Lord of the Rings, which is interesting. So I'm kind of all over the board. I was never one of those that really enjoyed the Gothic romance series. That wasn't my thing. But I did love Nora Roberts. I used to read a lot of her stuff. So kind of all over the board. I love to read, though. It's not uncommon for me to have 4 or 5 books going at the same time. What I have found recently, though, is with the stress and the anxiety, I was talking with Robin, who has a floss tube, Lady Robin, on YouTube. We were on a Zoom yesterday, and she's a librarian, and I asked her if she has found recently that her book reading has suffered with this stress and anxiety, and she said yes. And so because I've noticed that for myself, that I'm having sometimes a hard time concentrating. So the best time, I keep a pile of books out on the coffee table in this area of our house, so that if I sit down in the morning, I might end up reading a chapter or two. Let's see. I did love hearing Abby, Purple Cottage Crafts is her Instagram and her YouTube, and that my hairdo is called, that I had with the crown, was called a pineapple. Her daughter told her that. I was fascinated by that, which is kind of interesting, because now that I think about it, it reminded me of when you're in the Saguaro National Forest. There's all these saguaros, and every so often, rarely, it's considered good luck or a great, like something special, is when a saguaro has a crown, and that's. I'm gonna keep that one. So I answered Melissa's question of how long I've been quilting, since '93, but do I belong to quilt guilds? No, I don't. I try. I try to be a guild member, but guild meetings locally are held in the evening, and I'm not a go out. I'm surprising to a lot of people. I am internally a introvert and a homebody, and so I don't generally like to go out in the evening. That's kind of G in my time, and so I rarely do things in the evening, you know. Yeah, rarely do things in the evening. There is a guild, but it's about, for me, it's probably about maybe, let's see, 20, maybe 35 miles from me, that meets during the daytime, but I'm lazy. What can I say? Danny wanted me to share about my running. For those of you that don't know, I had a period in my life when I became a runner. Okay, here's the thing. If I become interested in something, that's why my quilting life is so extraordinary, because I've been doing it since '93. Because generally, I'm an ADHD kind of kid. My parents, who were both that way, still, it was a challenge for me as a child, and my teachers, because when I want to do something, or when I'm interested in something, I am 100% in. I mean 100%. And so I wanted to, I went to an all-girls high school, and we did not have a gym, or we had PE classes, but our PE classes consisted of running the lettuce fields behind our high school. We didn't have PE like they have now, and we didn't really have a sports. The boys' school had sports, but the girls' school, we didn't have a whole lot of sports teams. I don't think we had any, in fact. But when I was graduating from high school and going to college, I decided that I wanted to be on a tennis team. Now, mind you, I'd never played tennis before. I didn't own a tennis racket. And so I got a tennis racket, and the summer before college, I played tennis 8 hours a day. Yeah, I played tennis 8 hours a day. And so when I started college, I tried out and made the tennis team. That's how it goes. Do I play tennis now? No, no. When I skied, I used to ski a lot. And so when I turned 50, it was a great moment in time because my father had died at 49 of a heart attack, and so I was always told I was very much like my dad, both in temperament, humor, and physical makeup. And so the fact that I lived to 50 was like, oh my God. I wasted my 40s worrying that I was going to be dead by 50. And so I started to run and ran and ran and ran. And I entered 5Ks and 10Ks. And then I said, I think I need to run a marathon. Never having done anything like that. So I ran my butt off around Bend, Oregon, running up and down Pilot Butte. I'd run all over the place. And then I ran the Portland Marathon, the whole thing. I ran the whole thing. Did I do it again? No. It's kind of a weird space here, but I did. I ran and I enjoyed it and I miss it. But one of the things about running for me has been that I ended up developing spondylolisthesis, which is very painful in your back area. And so to run is to reignite that pain. So I have not done it. I know, but I love remembering that I ran. Okay, this is going to be kind of a long one to answer all these questions. What is my most favorite project and why? I can't pick one. It's like I whatever project I mean, sometimes I am definitely not in love with the process of a project. Like right now, working on Tannenbaum. Oh my gosh, that is so challenging to my brain. But I learned so much about myself, not just about the project, but about myself, about how I work through problems or how I'm able to make choices, that I pretty much have loved everything I've started. Whether I finish them or not is a whole nother question. Margot asked, have I done any embroidery quilts? I have 3 in the works. I love embroidery. I tend to make them into wall hangings or pillows, but I have 3. I have Over the Hills to Grandmother's House, we go Crabapple Hill ones. I have 3 Crabapple Hill ones that I'm working on. Someday they'll get done. Jan asked if I got pulled into coloring books. No, not in the physical sense. There was a time when I was traveling that I had a coloring app on my phone that I could color with the app, but that was so short-lived because all I thought about was I should just be stitching my wool. Deborah asked how I store my threads, my sew threads, and I will show that on the next video on how I store my Valdani threads. So we've gotten through page 1. So page 2. Charlotte asked about embroidery fabric. I have to say my favorite embroidery fabric is Kathy Schmidt's Crackle fabric. But truly any kind of a two-tone or you know, where it's just slightly off. The print is just a little different than the base. On a more neutral or tan, I like for embroidery. Let's see. Other crafts I would do if money wasn't an object, and for me, if time wasn't an object. And that would have to be punch needle. I'm very attracted to it. I have friends who have fallen down that rabbit hole, but it's the time factor. It's not so much the money, because I have a lot of floss that I could use already, but I don't have the tools, that's true. But it's more time. There's only so much time, and my life is so filled with already things that I love. Chris asked, who is my enabler? All of you. All of you are my enablers. My friend Sandy sends me stuff regularly. There's sometimes I've been so tempted to just, I can't look, but I love everything. You know, my friends that stitch at Old World Quilt Shop, oh, they're all enablers, you know. Floss Tube is totally enabling my cross-stitch world. Yeah. Connie asked about my children and grandchildren. I have 2 sons, basically 2 only children, because they're almost 9 years apart. And so my older son is a paramedic, and his wife is an ER nurse, and my younger son is an accountant, and his wife is now choosing to raise her children at home, which I absolutely love, because if there's one thing I would change about my entire life, is I would have stayed home with my older child if we could have done that. And I'm so happy that she's able to do that. I have 2 biological grandchildren. My older one is from my older son, and my younger one's from my younger son. I have one grandson who is by my older son's ex-wife. It's her son, and he's a teenager. Yeah, he's older. So they are all thriving. They are all healthy. I naturally keep my older son and his wife in my thoughts and prayers every day, because they're on the front line of this whole thing. And yeah, that's what matters the most to us, isn't it? It's our children. Yeah. Let's see. How did I become interested in sewing? It was my friends. It was my friends that dragged me down that hole. I worked with a group of nurses and doctors who kind of cross-socialized, and some of them were already starting to quilt, and so I got sucked down that rabbit hole, and we ended up staying together as a sewing group since '93, and the Fabric Stalkers. And we still try to meet, you know, do a retreat maybe once a year, twice a year now, because we're all grandparents. Most of us are grandparents or empty nesters, and only out of our group of 9, only a couple are still working. So we try to make things function around their schedules, you know, but yeah, quilt groups, your quilty girlfriends are the best. A question for G was, does he play in a band? In high school he played in a band, but no, he does not play in a band. He he plays for himself and for me. and for you guys on Quilt Roadies. You know, he started a year or two ago, maybe it's been a couple years now, of composing his own music. One thing about G is he plays music by ear, which is so out of my realm. My older son can play music by ear also. And the older son was in a band when he was in high school. But I find that a fascinating talent. Yeah, so he can play pretty much any string instrument. Although he plays a concertina too, he can play that by ear. That's not in my abilities, so I am fascinated by it. Let's see. Several people, including Veronica, asked if we will ever get a dog again. It's really hard. It's hard on a variety of different levels. Enzo was perfect. He was a perfect dog. Oh, I mean, he was just, it was like, yeah, he was a perfect dog for us. And now we're at a different time in our life, especially right now. Because I have severe allergies. I have asthma and severe allergies, and so I can't just have any dog. There's only a handful of breeds that I could live with, and poodles are one of them. And we have always had poodles as dogs, except for when we were first married. We had a German Shepherd, but he was an outdoor dog. He never came in the house. And he actually was abandoned by the people we bought the house from. So we got him by default. But poodles are our dog. The problem is they need grooming, and I'm thinking I can't even get groomed. I wonder how dogs get groomed during this period of time. And just a lot, our lifestyle, lots of different questions about how would we be doing justice by bringing another pet into our lives, another family member. It definitely is always on the table. We talk about it regularly. Not now, but next year, the year after, who knows, but definitely not now. Gosh, Enzo was a great dog. He was a great dog. Diane wanted to know, do I plant flowers in my yard? I love flowers, but I have landscapers. And by landscapers, I mean deer. And not just one deer. I have herds of deer in my yard. And I'm not talking just herds of deer in my yard. I'm talking about the deer come up to the front door and set off my Ring doorbell. They are all over the place. And so there is a limited amount of things, plants that you can plant here that they won't just eat down. I mean, I'm amazed at what they'll eat. So I like to have lavender. They don't eat that. I plant daffodil bulbs because they don't eat those, but they do eat tulips. Found that out. So never had one tulip blossom because as soon as it came up, they ate it. So that's the big thing for me. I like to have one basket of big flowers that I put on the inside of my little railing by my front door, but there's no guarantee that they won't trim it. Yeah. Let's see. Several people, Linda, Marion, asked how long G and I have known each other, and also there was a question of how long have we been married? Well, the story of Anna and G is a little bit different in that we had been in physical company for 2 weeks, 3 dates when we got engaged. Yeah. Much to the, when I think about it, my poor parents, they must have been freaked out. But we worked for competing companies. This was before I was a nurse. We worked for competing companies, and we went out. He was already in the process of relocating to Oregon when I met him. And so we went out on one date, and then he left for Oregon to scope out where he would want to live and work, because his family lived up there. And after 2 weeks being apart, he came back. And, you know, this wasn't during cell phone days. So, you know, you're calling or writing a letter. And so after 2 weeks, he came back, and we had 2 more dates. And then we got engaged. And that was in May of that year. And because I knew my mother would want to have her daughter have a wedding, we got married in September, because just to get organized for a big wedding, and it was a big wedding. It took from May to September to organize that. I was afraid to tell my mom, so I called my dad. And my dad said, "I'll tell your mother and we'll meet you back home," because they were out sailing. They had just come in from a day of sailing when I called him. And he said, "We'll meet you back home in 2 hours." That was the day I was the most nervous. Oh my gosh. So we got married in September, and this year will be 43 years. Yeah, 43 years. And let me tell you, I know everyone thinks that what they see is this perfect facade. 43 years of marriage is a grace. Lots and lots of grace. Lots and lots of being okay with not being right. Lots of periods of anger and struggle and being okay with not being right. It's never a perfect or easy path, but that sometimes if you make the right decisions, I guess it's okay, especially if you're okay with not being right all the time. So yeah, 43 years this year. Sometimes we get up and we go, wow. That's the same reason people ask, how can you be with your husband in a van? I have no problems. Let me tell you, I have no problems with that. Sandy asks, what did your mom sew on the Featherweight? Clothing. The only thing my mom ever sewed were curtains and clothes. And one Christmas we had matching outfits, all red plaid corduroy. My dad had a shirt, my mom had a skirt, and my sister and I had jumpers. And boy, was that picture ever good. I wish I could find that. Jenny asks, why do I subscribe to only one magazine? And I just, they sit around. They sit around so much, and I started realizing that I was just wasting space wherever they're sitting around in piles, but so far I'm still loving the Primitive Projects magazine. My first quilt, Deb asked what my first quilt is. Well, my first quilt, my first big bed-size quilt was called the Queen Mum. And it is because, I can't hold it up because it's queen-sized. It is, oh no, lost my notes. It is all out of Debbie Mum fabric. And it was a quilt that you had to design the layout and figure out how to fit everything in. And I decided I was going to use all of Debbie Mum's whole fabric line that year because I just loved it. And it was a great learning experience, not only in trying to fit everything in, but you're getting pieces of it. But it has a lot of history. It means a lot to me. That's why I still have it. Because when I finished the top, and I think this fabric line came from South Seas. This thing is big. But I used one whole fabric line. Isn't that fun? Okay, now you're going to have to excuse me because I got to pick up my notes. There I am. When I got the top done, the fabric rep saw it, and so he asked if it could travel the United States for a year as an example. I probably sold a lot of fabric for them, so that was the first quilt, big bed-size quilt that I ever made. And so he said it had to be quilted because he couldn't risk having it come apart in transporting and traveling. I'd never quilted a quilt before, and I had this funky old sewing machine that I was using to piece it, so I decided I needed a sewing machine to actually quilt it. And many of you might already know the story, but I bought a sewing machine out of the hotel room from a traveling salesman who came through Bend, Oregon. And I didn't know how to quilt, so I got a spool of monofilament thread and I stitched in the ditch the entire quilt. So this quilt, this big quilt, was quilted on a domestic machine with monofilament thread in the ditch. In the ditch, the entire thing. I mean, around every single piece. So it traveled the United States with the fabric rep for a year, and then I entered it, because I didn't know any better, I entered it in the PQIF show, and it was accepted. I couldn't even take off work or had the money to go to the PQIF show, so my mom went because it was only 2 hours from her house at that time, and took a picture for me. And she stood around and listened to people talk about it. I just think that is so funny. So yeah, when I decide to do something, I tend to do it big, and then once I satisfied the itch, I'm done. So, do I enter quilts? Someone asked, do I enter quilts in shows and competitions? That was it. That was it. I mean, I like to enter things into our sister's quilt show because there's no judging, you know. So my one and only quilt was entered. But I always like the experience of life, and so I've had quilts in it's kind of like Quilt Mania magazine, but it's the British edition. I've had quilts in there. I've had miniature quilts in when Miniature Quilt magazine was still in existence. I sent off patterns, you know. I dabbled in quilt patterns design. I did that for about 6 months or a year, and then I thought, okay, I just want to quilt. I don't want to design that. Besides the fact that I don't have that designer brain, I learned that pretty fast. So, yeah, I just like to know what it feels like to try something, and I have had many extraordinary experiences because of my lack of fear of being told no or of being rejected, and my desire to know what an experience feels like. So those two things must have driven my parents crazy, but they've created quite a Forrest Gump type life. Is that, I guess that's the best way I can put it. I've had a Forrest Gump type of life. I've sang with a professional composer on stage. I've played a grand piano on stage. Am I a piano player? No. But oh, sometimes I crack myself up, let me tell you. Okay, so I dropped this, and let's see. Have I made a Wendy Williams pattern? Sue asked. I have not, but it does not mean I will not, but I have not. How long have I lived in Bend? Well, I no longer live in Bend, but in Central Oregon, I've lived over 30 years. I've been coming to Central Oregon. I came to Central Oregon for vacation at least twice a year for 10, 15 years before that. So, but in Bend, I lived in Bend probably maybe 20, 25 years or so before we moved to Sisters. And we've been in Sisters a long time. Of course, we lived in Sisters before we moved to Bend. Whole nother story. I think I answered all the questions I wrote down from last night. Someone asked where was my favorite place to live, and I think I have to say here. Small town living is nice, but it's only nice if you have the ability to travel. You know, it could get probably confining in some ways, but I don't. This community provides so much emotionally and intellectually and creatively. So I would say, although I didn't think I would like living in the forest because I was a beach girl, an ocean girl, and I thought I couldn't survive without the smell of the ocean. But G always makes sure we get to the ocean once a year, so that's good. And Carol asked what my favorite part of nursing was, and the thing about being a nurse is it provides you with the opportunity to change. It's a career that has, just because you're a nurse does not mean your life is only on one path. You get to change departments or skills, and so it's kind of like quilting. You never can get bored. If you start not liking one part of nursing, you could transfer to a whole nother part and learn that. So nursing is a fantastic career. I think it's challenging for them now. I think it's challenging for, all the people that kept going to work because they're essential workers, and they put their own life and their own family at risk by showing up and opening the grocery store or going to the hospital, cleaning the hospital, the doctors, my son, the paramedics, the fire department, the police department, the gas station attendant. I mean, really. I tip my gas station attendant. I mean, in Oregon, up until a couple weeks ago, they were pumping your gas. I mean, yeah. They're providing a service. They're providing a service. And so I hope you enjoyed this fireside chat. It's a long one, I know. But I wanted to answer everyone's questions and give you a piece of our lives, and to know that I really enjoyed reading all of your comments. And I hope all of you are being safe, making the right choices for yourself, your family, and your neighbors. Stay healthy. Keep stitching. I know sometimes it feels like you are losing your stitching mojo. It's still there. It's just waiting. And isn't that the best kind of friend? One who waits through all of your angst? You take care, and I appreciate each and every one of you.